Talivita. I am happy that today I'm going to talk about something which is very important to me, and it is in relation to um, consultancy and negotiation. Negotiation is very central to every consultant because you want your best bargain to be upheld by your service, rather your client, the person who is going to benefit from your services. And it's important that they appreciate your capacity, your capabilities, your ability to persuade or convince them. So today I want to go through why it is important to any consultant of whichever name called to put their best foot forward in negotiation. So good negotiation starts with knowing what you want and putting it forth in conversation. This requires a substantial amount of preparation and asking the right questions through the discovery process rather than improvising responses in calls and emails. That is why proximity in any negotiator is important, because you are looking at the body language of the other person, or perhaps you get instant in real-time response. So when you negotiate from a position of strong preparation, the other party will be more comfortable putting you on your terms based on your expertise. Understanding what kind of leverage you have. So design firms bring a range of skills and hard-fought experience to bear on client problems. It's important for you to appreciate on what is it that the client wants, and that the client cannot obtain that kind of information or skill from anywhere else. So it's important that you prepare, and know your client, know their challenges, know their stronghold, know what impresses them the most, and that is what you do. If you are a shoe shiner and your client is one that has a dirty shoe, it's important to have you dust it. So it's incumbent that you understand what kind of leverage you have and how best you can position, and of course do that with skill, because you are an expert and that is what is needed. So both expertise, rather beyond your expertise, you also have to have leverage with regard to schedule, time, scope, and other variables that are necessary for the client's success. It is the client that must see success which you must deliver or provide. And they must see you being that end point, that end game. You're the only one that is capable of providing them that, not any other person. They shouldn't have the opportunity to look elsewhere. So make sure your position is realistic. So if you want $2 million and a platinum plate Rolls Royce, negotiations would be difficult. However, if you're presenting an estimate for a design project, or you have some strong logic behind your pricing, or some ground as to why your audience will prefer green instead of blue for their new logo, you should change your position and look at how they buy into what you are saying. That is typical of a negotiator. That is typical of a client. That is typical of a consultant that is persuading a client. At that vantage point, you are realistic, you are accommodating, you are understanding. So compromises should be around shared interests. If the client doesn't see that you are sharing, or you're bearing into, or you're trying to understand, they will deny you the opportunity. So don't give up in your negotiations until you've exhausted possibilities that meet your shared interests and help your firm create a quality product. You must push best case scenarios, preserving your project schedule, your budget, your creative direction, and so on and so forth. You should know what other cards you can place on the table to return to your hand before considering any compromise. Because if you do that, then you will not provide the ultimate product that your client would need. And that means you may not be able to sustain or hold on to that client to ensure that you can be able to pay rent, you can be able to pay salary for your staff, or you can be able to even meet your basic needs to ensure that you continue and survive. Always keep the big picture in mind. Know why decisions require formal, or rather, know which decisions require formal negotiation and which are just potholes in the road. Change a headline or swap out a photo, and this shouldn't be just for drama or the beat of it. So, it is important for you to also know how to play safe. That's another story. If you have strong creative brief, a strong contract, a template of sorts, you say, I have this. Can we please share this? Can we peruse through this? I think this is what we think would work for you. This is in the best interest of you, my client, and our consultancy, and we will deliver what you will deserve. So it's important that you don't treat every single discussion or point of feedback with a client as a potential conflict. Because if you create conflict, then you are trying to give your client opportunity to look elsewhere and not look at you as the only sole opportunity. And that means you're losing out on breadwinning for your family, losing out for breadwinning or a salary for your clients that you are rather your employers, or rather employees whom you've left, for whom you must negotiate, and perhaps they will come and do the work. So don't agree to a deal until your team agrees. Because if you are the best foot forward, you are the team leader and you are the one who is going to negotiate, you ought to have got the understanding of your team. You must also have them in mind. So when discussing action steps, withhold agreement when necessary. Avoid saying yes on anything related to schedule, scope management, and other contractually required action steps until you can review the discussion with your internal team. Mind you, you are a consultant. You're conducting a consultancy. You are providing a service, which service is going to bear on the shoulders of a big team. So you've been led to negotiate on their behalf. And it's also important to adopt that kind of language of wording, which means we will perform, we will deliver, we will, and make sure that your team's goals and your client's needs are well aligned. To quote Robert Solomon in his excellent book, The Art of Client Service, make no commitment without consultation. The other is be aware of the cultural stereotypes. I once worked with a foreign client whose method of negotiation was to state in every deliverable review that there were always things that could be improved. We found ourselves increasing the project scope and number of deliverables in order to compensate for the perceived lack in quality. You know, there are things like a cost extension, where that means you will need the resources. But there's also a non-cost extension. So you need to have those in mind. And who is going to pay you for that time? Or who is going to meet? Are you the service provider who is going to meet for that lost time? Because that would mean already your client is looking at you bearing the cost or you having a burden over them, and they may not appreciate that. So it is important for you to know the feasibility of when. So their negotiating position wasn't unusual in their country, but it was for our team. After a few nerve-wracking weeks, we realized that the client's escalations were an opportunity to set up clear approval criteria to demonstrate how our design work had merit and was on brief. In our final presentation, the success of our project was clearly evident to everyone within the organization. So don't rush to agree with the client need. Don't rush to agree with the client need. If the stakes are high, take your time and hash out the finer points in detail. The longer and more drawn out the negotiation, the more important it is to never show your settling point. Get some time and space to think it over. Don't jump on the phone and immediately try to iron it out. Otherwise, whoever you're negotiating with may think that they can push their position even further. These situations are very hard for designers or planners or consultancy firms where you're going to delve into, dig dive into information. And then, so we love to solve problems as quickly as possible. The other aspect, which is very important, or a skill that we require of a negotiator, is keep your dialogue humane, respectful, and honest. So when you are negotiating with your client or your boss, make sure you don't turn your negotiations into an us versus them scenario. So our clients and co-workers have the same set of human needs that we do, and relating with them on a human level strengthen your continued working relationship. It will also cement the expectation that no matter what happens in your work, you will always be on equal footing as people. The other is be prepared to leave that table at any point. Be prepared to leave that table at any point. So be willing to walk away from a negotiation if you think the options available are going to hurt you in the long term. Being willing to say no is important in contract negotiations, and the natural human desire to avoid conflict is something that a potential client may exploit. It's okay to say no. If the negotiation fails, don't take it personally. Don't take it personally. Hindsight is 2020. If you don't land a project because it wasn't right fit, or the client overrules your beautiful color scheme because they dislike purple, learn from what happened and move forward. Don't let your conscience eat a hole in your gut. Always, these failures can have a big impact on improving future negotiations. Because imagine you are the one who lost the negotiation, and then perhaps the client is the one who calls you back. Look at a scenario. I'll give you the scenario of you walking through the Kampala streets, and then you find a very nice shoe, and you start to discuss with the hawker, and then you tell him you want to pay him what is in half. And then he says, well, no. And then you realize that actually what you gave him is way above what he ought to have taken. And then you're walking away. Chances are very high that you'll be the very same person who will realize that you actually were way below the cut. And then you walk back, and then it is you who lost, not him. No wonder he did not tell you, oh, come back, or it's okay. So you must appreciate that you are the one perhaps must be in control. That gives you a vantage point for you to look and ask further, for you to push ahead, for him to give you a phone call after he thinks you have arrived home, and then he asks, do you have time? Can we talk? So failure to land a project can lead to a future win. Relationships between your co-workers and your clients continue even if you failed in your first negotiations. If you have been cordial and truthful about your position and the experience that you bring throughout the entire negotiation process, you will gain respect. Mutual respect comes from establishing clear boundaries and reinforcing them throughout the life of a relationship. This is the currency that will yield future work and support when you get down to business. So it's important to also appreciate and know why such consultancy services are provided and by whom. Not anybody who without skill can provide a consultancy service, because it's important that you, for starters, know what is your skill and why you're the only one. So when negotiating a consulting rate, because you are placing a price tag on yourself, so you will probably be asked flat out to name your price, and there is no way around it. When this happens, you are setting the maximum bar at which you will get paid and need to negotiate down from there. You may want to pad your number a bit to give someone room to negotiate. If you don't do that, you are really done. You are completely beaten at your game. And that is, of course, a plus for your client and a loss for you. Now, who is a consultant? A consultant, derived from a Latin word consultare, which means to deliberate, is a professional, also known as an expert, a specialist, who provides advice and further purposeful activities in an area of specialization. Consulting is not in itself a profession, but instead a certain type of employment, similar and comparable to staffing. And when so provided, there is an incentive which accrues from the same. Other experts, such as Peter Block, define a consultant as someone who has influence over an individual, group, or organization, but who has no direct authority to implement changes. He contrasts this with a surrogate manager, who is a person who acts on behalf of or in place of a manager. The key difference is that a consultant never makes decisions for the individual or group, whereas a surrogate manager does make decisions. Consultancy in the UK is defined as the role of providing professional expertise advice in a particular field of science or business to either an organization or an individual. And the Harvard Business School provides a more specific definition of a consultant as someone who advises how to modify, proceed in, or streamline in a given process within a specialized area. In his book, The Consulting Bible, Alan Weiss defines that when we consultants walk away from a client, the client's condition should be better than it was before we arrived or we failed. There is no legal protection given to the job title, consultant. So according to the Institute of Management Consultants of the United States of America, the value of a consultant as compared to a subject matter expert is to be able to correctly diagnose and effectively transform an often ill-defined problem and apply information, resources, and processes to create a workable and usable solution. Some experts are good consultants, vice versa. Some are neither, few are both. Another differentiation perspective would be that a consultant sells advice, but an expert sells his expertise, or consultants versus coaches. And a consultant and a contractor, the consultant in a role of sharing her or his knowledge and advice, whereas the contractor builds something for the client. So a study found that business consultants maintain a very humble approach in their partnership with their client and believe that the ultimate goal is to make the customer move forward. Further, consultants are conscious in amounts of control and discretion which comes from the consumer and understand that criticism of their role is part of their work and sometimes even justified. So the role of a consultant outside the medical sphere, for instance, where the term is used specifically for a grade of a doctor, can fall under one or two general categories. Internal consultant, someone who is employed by and operates within a client's organization, maybe as part of an internal consultancy unit, or external consultant, someone who is employed externally to the client, either by a consulting firm or some other agency whose expertise is provided as part of a contract for a fee or a rate. So a business case for hiring a consultant, traditionally by hiring a consultant, clients have access to higher grades of expertise that would be financially feasible for them to retain in-house consulting services. Additionally, consultants are key persons with specific domain skills. Interim management, also called as consultant manager. Another business is that a consultant save the company's money. For example, a specialized or an expert tax consultant would save the company's 20% of its taxes or only charges 10% in fees and enables the company to a net of perhaps 10 shillings or 10% savings. In the UK government sector, since 2010, the Cabinet Office has required government departments to implement spending controls, which restrict the appointments of consultants and temporary staff in order to reduce consultants' expenditure and ensure that the use of consultants offers value for money. Government guidance requires information on all spending on consultancy and professional fees valued at £100,000 or above, excluding recoverable VAT, and or a duration of 3 months or no longer, to be submitted to the Cabinet Office. So having a consultant is an added value or is a benefit that an organization really bear not to afford unless it just had it. I say this for God and my country. Thank you.